Wait a minute! Don't leave me here! I screamed. My husband, in response, simply said, "Come back when your leg is healed." With that, he abandoned me in the mountain wilderness. Wait! Don't leave me here! I cried out again, only for my husband to smirk, give me a glance, and then turn his back to me. Without my phone, he left me stranded in the mountains. Overcome with fear, I desperately reached out for his retreating figure, knowing my hand couldn't reach him. My legs were broken, encased in plaster casts. There was no way I could catch up with him as he walked away swiftly while I was crawling on the ground. My husband cheerfully climbed into his car and drove off in a flash. My name is Jennifer, a 35-year-old office worker. My family consists of my husband Robert, who is 3 years older than me and also works in an office. We're in our 3rd year of marriage and have no children, working together as a couple. Robert, being a traditionalist, doesn't do any housework. Not only does he not help me with chores, but he also tends to say things like, "Hey, pass me the remote. Could you make me a cup of tea? I can't find that. Bring it here." Even when the items are right in front of him. Initially, I was also working, and I told him a few times, "Hey, I work too, you know. Help me out a bit." But he just responded, "I'm the one bringing in more money. It's only natural for you to do it." When I asked him again to help, he started to respond with, "Stop nagging me," and would slam down the newspaper or a cup just to make a point. Eventually, he started to ignore my morning greetings and wouldn't even respond when I tried to engage him, so I gave up. Since then, I've been doing all the household chores by myself. I must admit, there are times when I'm exhausted from work and I wish he would help me. But I figured it's better to put up with it than to be subjected to complaints or be ignored. One day, I was on my way to work. I saw a child about to fall down the stairs at the train station. Without a second thought, I darted out in front of him, shouting, "Watch out!" and shielded the child from the fall. However, I couldn't stop myself and ended up tumbling down the stairs while holding the child. The scenery whirled around me, and I felt intense pain in my arms and back. While falling, I heard a dull snapping sound, followed by a pain so severe it was incomparable to anything I had experienced before. When I finally came to a stop, I checked the child in my arms, who seemed to be so stunned that he had forgotten to cry. Relieved that he was not seriously injured, I tried to stand up, but ended up collapsing due to the intense pain in my legs. I asked the station staff, who had come running over, to call an ambulance, and I was transported to the hospital. As expected, the result was that I had broken my leg. Upon reaching the hospital, I called Robert and explained the situation, asking him to come to the hospital. "I'm sorry for making you come. It might be a little dramatic, but I ended up having to get a cast." "Don't worry about it. Let's get you home first. Don't worry about anything here." Robert seemed genuinely worried. "What a kind husband you have," said the nurse standing by, to which Robert replied, "Well, I always help around the house." He shows off with a blatant lie. I was taken aback for a moment, thinking, what the? But didn't want to make a fuss right then and there, so I kept quiet. When we got home, Robert's attitude took a complete 180. "Hey, I'm hungry. Get me some food. Oh, and iron this shirt while you're at it." He demanded household chores of me. Being wheelchair-bound and unable to stand, I exclaimed, "What? Can't you see my condition? You said you'd take care of things while I was in the hospital." Stunned by my words, he retorted, "I only said that because you were in the hospital. Get it done, would you? You couldn't have possibly protected the kid. You're too clumsy. You can't move that quickly." It appeared that Robert didn't trust what I was saying. "That's not true. Why would you say something so cruel?" "Doesn't really matter, does it? Are you taking time off work? What about your salary?" Robert seemed more concerned about the money than my well-being. I had been told that I would receive some sort of compensation from my job for the time I was off, but it would be less than my usual salary. "You can't do household chores or bring in a salary," You're really useless, he criticized. As I was too stunned to respond, Robert plunked down on the sofa and grumbled loudly. Why on earth did I marry such a woman? Why would you say something like that? It's not like I wanted to be in this condition. Enough with your yammering. If you have the energy to whine so much, start taking care of things around the house. You're capable of doing that, aren't you? Without even making eye contact, Robert yelled at me. I felt a sense of darkness overcoming me and blurted out, "That's enough. If you're going to be like that, I'm going back to my parents' house." Robert seemed more than ready for this. "All right then, I'll drive you there," he chirped as he went to grab the car keys. I packed only the bare essentials in a bag, using my crutches to get around. Robert didn't even bother to help me into the car with my crutches, instead complaining, "Hey, what's the holdup? Get in already!" He carelessly tossed my bag into the car, clearly irritated. My parents' home was a 2-hour drive across the mountains from where we lived. I felt a bit suspicious that Robert was willing to drive me all the way there, but I had no choice but to rely on him at the moment. Robert remained irritated, clicking his tongue every time we hit a red light. I figured I could just think about what to do next after I got to my parents' home. While lost in these thoughts, the car gradually left the city behind and started entering the mountainous area. Before long, there were only a few streetlights and hardly any houses around us, with nothing but the straight road stretching ahead. Robert's irritated demeanor didn't change, and all I could think about was getting to my parents' home as soon as possible. Suddenly, the car came to a stop. Wait, what's wrong? Did we run out of gas? Surprised, I turned to ask Robert, only to be yelled at. "Get out of the car here!" Huh? Here? Why? I can't be stranded out here. Shut up! Don't come back until you're walking again. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine this scenario. Despite my desperate attempts to hold onto the seatbelt and the door, Robert forcefully shoved me out of the car. As I shouted, begging him not to leave me, he simply smirked, got back in the car, and left. Unable to move, all I could do was cry out as loud as I could. But Robert made a U-turn, and the car soon disappeared back the way it came. He left me without my bag or my belongings. My phone was in my bag, so I had no way to contact anyone. It was evening when I left the house, and the surroundings were getting darker and darker. I was at my wit's end, unsure of what to do next. I had let my folks know I was coming home, but I had no idea if they would come looking for me. I began crawling, inching my way towards where there might be people. Soon, my breath hitched from the pain and exhaustion, and looking back, I could see I hadn't made much progress. Suddenly, I heard the light, rapid footsteps of someone approaching. A woman in jogging clothes came into view. When I desperately called out for help, she sped up and ran over. "What happened? What are you doing all alone here? And what's with the outfit?" Following her gaze to my leg, I saw the cast, dirty from dragging on the ground, and my clothes partially worn out from rubbing against the asphalt. Through tears, I explained my situation. The woman responded, "My home is just around the corner. I'll bring my car. Just wait here." She then removed her windbreaker and draped it over me. All I could do was express my gratitude and pray that she would return as I waited. True to her word, she was back in her car within about 5 minutes. "I'll take you to my place. Where do you live? Oh, but first, we should probably go to the hospital." Besides providing me shelter in her car, she even offered to drive me home. I suggested that we should go to my parents' house first, as they might be worried. She agreed. Her name was Patricia, and she was incredibly empathetic as I cried and told her my story. Her strong condemnation of what happened to me, saying it was inhumane and beyond forgiveness, gave me a sense of relief and caused even more tears to flow. We ended up bonding over our shared disdain for my husband, Robert, and before I knew it, we had arrived at my parents' place. "Thank you so much. Please, come in so I can express my gratitude properly." I invited her in to show my thanks. At first, she declined, saying she had work the next day. However, since I couldn't walk on my own, she helped me to the entrance of the house. My mother, who had come out to greet us, repeatedly thanked Patricia, eventually persuading her to come inside. Once inside, my parents and I thanked Patricia profusely. I then explained to my parents why I had returned and how Patricia had helped me. "What a jerk! You should divorce him right away! Anyways, you can stay here until your leg is healed." My father was angry and suggested divorce. "You should get some rest first." My mother, also worried, suggested. But I had something I needed to do. "I'll call Robert." I decided to use the home phone to contact Robert. My parents were standing by my side. "You're home already? Come back as soon as you're healed. Who do you think will take care of the house without you?" Robert showed no signs of remorse. Because I had put the call on speakerphone, my parents could hear everything. Upon hearing Robert's words, they were furious. "What the hell is he saying? He's got a lot of nerve." My father was yelling into the phone, his voice loud and full of fury. My mother, too, wearing a stern expression. Even though his words must have reached the other end of the line, Robert was ignoring him, repeating demands that I should get back to housework once healed. "Impossible. I can't be with you anymore. Let's get a divorce." Robert heaved a deep sigh, saying, "Why does it have to come to this?" As if it was all my fault. I let out an equally weary sigh, quickly hung up the phone. Behind me, my parents were seething at Robert's audacious attitude, and it took quite some time to calm them down. The following day, our house phone was ringing persistently. It wasn't the type to display who was calling, but I had a hunch it was probably Robert. I kept ignoring it, but the calls just wouldn't stop. It occurred to me that maybe it really could be someone else, since it was during Robert's work hours. And when I picked up, Robert's frantic voice pierced through the phone. "Finally! Hey, why did you ignore me?" "Never mind that. Help me out. I'm about to get fired." Robert didn't even check if it was me who picked up, and just started complaining about his imminent firing. "Oh, really? And what do you want me to do about it? Your job is none of my business." His pleading voice came through the phone, but I just ignored it and put the receiver down. If he's getting fired, serves him right, I thought. Turns out Patricia was Robert's mistress. As she heard my story in the car, she began to suspect that Robert was eerily similar to her boyfriend. And when I phoned Robert about the divorce, Patricia was certain upon hearing his voice. When she asked for a picture and I showed her, she broke down, collapsing onto her knees. I, too, was in the dark about Robert's infidelity. I was completely put at ease by Robert, who had no business trips, no working on his days off. I was furious for being neglected and cheated on. But Patricia's rage far surpassed my expectations. According to Patricia, she had met Robert at her workplace. Her workplace was a subsidiary of Robert's company. She was working part-time there when she encountered Robert, who was visiting on business. Robert began to visit her and wanted to establish a personal relationship. After hearing from colleagues that Robert was divorced, he himself also explained to her about his divorce history. Patricia, drawn by his seemingly sincere character, started dating him under the premise of future marriage as suggested by Robert. But his true nature was a man who not only lied about being married, but abandoned his injured wife in the wilderness. Patricia, enraged at herself for being fooled by such a man, wore a chillingly scary smile. Her revenge probably led to Robert's dismissal. After I hung up on Robert, Patricia called me. "He's in a real mess. My uncle got furious about this and fired him." The uncle Patricia was referring to was the president of Robert's company. It turns out the president and Patricia are uncle and niece. Patricia, who has health issues and finds it difficult to work long hours, started working part-time at her uncle's subsidiary, which is close to her home. She told me she was jogging in the mountains that day as a way to build strength and save money she would have spent on gym memberships. Apparently, the CEO doesn't have any children of his own, and seems to have doted heavily on his niece, Patricia. Patricia, however, didn't want it known that she had such a connection, as they worked in different places and had different surnames, and thus, she never mentioned it to Robert. That's probably why he didn't know. But be careful, she warned. According to my uncle, Robert was saying a lot of inappropriate things. I suspect he'll be heading to your place again. Just as Patricia had said over the phone, Robert showed up at my parents' house that night. Perhaps because he got no response to his calls. He knocked loudly on the front door, screaming at the top of his lungs. "You got me fired from my job! You come too! Explain everything to the boss and apologize!" According to Robert, he was fired because I supposedly instigated Patricia. He seemed to think that the boss misunderstood because I exaggeratedly told Patricia about his affair after I found out. It occurred to me then, this is what Patricia meant by inappropriate. But my father had already opened the front door. "Misunderstanding my foot? How dare you ask my daughter to apologize after you cheated on her? You got what you deserved. Now get out of here!" My father shoved Robert out of the doorway, took a glance at him groveling and begging for forgiveness, and slammed the door shut, locking it. Yet, we could still hear him causing a ruckus outside, so I spoke to Robert through the intercom. "Let me clarify something since you still don't get it. You think you got fired because you laid hands on the boss's niece? You should know better. The boss had explained everything, from A to Z." From the CEO's perspective, this incident was seen as an employee from the parent company deceived an employee from the subsidiary company into an extramarital affair. Moreover, because he was dealing with a part-time employee who was in a weaker position than a regular employee, it wasn't just a simple affair, as Robert put it. There isn't a CEO who would overlook such a bad example of a parent company taking advantage of a subsidiary. Even though the CEO himself had scolded Robert countless times, Robert still thought it was just about his affair. The affair just happened to be with the boss's niece this time, but it would have been a sackable offense no matter who the other party was. If you just explained that you didn't have an affair, don't you realize how absurd that sounds? If you don't want to get arrested on top of being fired, just go home. As for the divorce, get ready to deal with a lawyer. Only then did Robert fall silent. Finally, peace returned to my parents' home. After that, I hired a lawyer and divorced him. Furthermore, after consulting with Patricia, the two of us decided to sue Robert for damages. I sued Robert for the pain and suffering of being cheated on, and Patricia sued him for the pain and suffering of being deceived into a relationship under the pretense that he was single. Robert, who was fired for disciplinary reasons and therefore had no severance pay, turned to his parents for help. But as soon as I decided to get a divorce due to this incident, I had already called Robert's parents. Upon learning this, Robert's parents were furious and refused to lend him any money. However, since he couldn't afford to pay the damages without their help, they decided to make him work at a company they knew. At that company, Robert was at the very bottom of the hierarchy, and he couldn't look down on people as he used to, thinking he was from a parent company or a subsidiary. Moreover, the reason why he was working there was well known, and he was made to work like a horse while being looked down upon every day. However, from Patricia and I's point of view, we don't care where the money comes from, as long as the alimony is paid. And we are not interested in how Robert is treated. After that, my fracture healed, and I got along well with Patricia as friends. The combined damages from the two of us amounted to a decent sum, so we were planning to go on a trip next time.